Perfect. So before I get into the insider threat point of view, I just want to bring up a few things with respect to Raytheon and how we're going about our business, how we're going about protecting our network, and also protecting our internal, our internal programs, our internal data. Raytheon, it really evolved over the last 10 years from really kind of expanding our cybersecurity beyond protecting from external threats. We have spent an excruciating amount of money protecting external people that are trying to do damage against Raytheon. Raytheon is a very large global company and has a tremendous amount of information to protect. We've taken a defense in-depth strategy, kind of a layered strategy, which builds upon our successes of protecting against advanced threat protection, APTs, malware, as people are trying to take information out of our corporation. And where we've evolved to is we've kind of taken it, kind of a step further, and are now bringing in the insider threat program, kind of up a notch, where now we can look at both ends of the spectrum. We can look at a trusted individual who Raytheon has brought in to do a variety of tasking. We can look at those trusted individuals and ensure that they are doing the work that they've been assigned to. And what we can do is look at also external actors that have become internal actors. Maybe they've stolen a credential, how they've stolen the credentials. We have some advanced analytics as well that can take a variety of data and look at different tip-offs and look at indicators that can help build us a case, an insider threat case, or even a case against an external actor. So Raytheon's taken this in-depth approach, and it's becoming a very effective program that our company is very proud of. But for the sake of this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're building our effective insider threat program within Raytheon, and how we've built it over the years, and how we've taken our knowledge for the last 15 years, and how we're bringing these to customers across the world. So with that said, I'm going to kind of go into a little bit more on our insider threat program. So the first thing I always bring up to organizations from an insider threat point of view is you have to understand the problem. You have to understand why people are looking and what they're looking for. If you look at a Forrester research just came out with something that said organizations, insiders account for more than 60% of data breaches. 60%, 60. That's tremendous. And that's tremendous from a fact of now you can begin quantifying the problem, because now you can begin seeing potential cases that are being discussed openly about the problem. And that's another point that people don't understand. Insider threat cases are new. Carnegie Mellon's been doing research for about the last 10 to 15 years, but if you look at what breaches have been made known to the public, there hasn't been a tremendous amount. You hear a lot about what's happening from, whether it's a Chinese hacker, whether a Russian hacker, or maybe it's a hacker trying to hack in a government system into a corporate situation. But what you don't hear a lot about is the compromises that happen in the inside. And I think that goes to what Alan says, it's a cultural thing. Because once you start discussing openly that you've had a trusted insider that has a data breach, committed anti-sabotage or fraud, now you're kind of exposing, I would like to say, your own warts. And that's tough for companies to do. That's very tough for companies to do. For the government, it's also very tough, because government really does not want to expose potentially what a trusted insider, an insider threat breach was, because that could expand to other vulnerabilities and it could give insight into maybe tools or techniques. So I think the problem, first thing, is to understand a problem. And you have cases like this one, where you're talking about sabotage from an insider, where you have a Navy individual who is sabotaging and damaging United States Navy computers from the inside. This person was a trusted insider. This person had a clearance. This person was a Navy contractor and was prosecuted and sentenced for damaging Navy computer systems. This wasn't an external attack. This was an internal attack. And throughout history, you have many of these cases that now are being understood that this was a trusted insider and a breach from an insider. So once you understand the problem, once you really get a grasp on what the problem is, what do you do about it? Do you stay with the status quo? Do you stay with the techniques that you've used in the past? You kind of look at the way you've been doing and say, well, I've got it all covered. I don't need to change anything. And I think that's where a lot of people make a mistake. I think a lot of people just stay with the status quo. A lot of people just say, you know what, Mike, I have bought a lot of tools in the past. I've put a lot of processes in the past. I've done a lot of work from an insider threat point of view, or not a lot of work from an insider threat point of view. You know, I've built all this external protection tools. I can't afford another technology. I can't afford to change a process. And to me, that says you're staying with the status quo. And if you stay with the status quo, every day your risk is being elevated. Every day your risk is being elevated from the fact that you are susceptible to a significant breach by an insider. And I'm not talking about just theft. Theft is always the first thing that people think about. They're always thinking about, well, I'm trying to keep information from being taken from my company. But I think things like sabotage, fraud, waste, and abuse, violence in the workforce, all these type of things are different, what I call causes of insider threat, and they all should be identified as a potential risk to your corporation. So why aren't you auditing? We talked about it before. Is it a corporate culture? Do you not have the lack of the proper resources? It could not be maybe lack of resources, but it could also be the right type of resources. Because the type of resources that look for an insider threat breach could be different than a typical IT security resource. IT security resource is looking for vulnerabilities, is looking for the next piece of malware, is looking for the next piece of APT. Whereas a resource needed for an insider threat breach could be understanding what the behavior of an insider would be, understanding how the behavior of an insider is basically affecting your corporation. So it's not so much the resource, could be the type of resources. And it's new. It's new for us. People say it looks hard. People say, well, Mike, insider threat is hard. And I tell them it's not hard. If you put together a simplistic process, put together a process that is effective and works effectively, you will not be susceptible to the next hit. You will not be susceptible to the next noted. You will mitigate your risk. You will lower your risk. Is it 100% foolproof? No. But the idea is you need to mitigate the risk and lower the risk. So we talked a little bit about before. We're not talking rocket science. I think Alan actually mentioned that. We're talking about common sense. We're talking about common sense processes, common sense procedures, and common sense methodologies for protecting against an insider threat breach. Carnegie Mellon has a tremendous amount of research information. The CERT has actually there's a good book called The CERT Guide to Insider Threats. I actually have it, I've read it. It's a very good book to start understanding insider threats. On the web, there's a common sense guide that Carnegie Mellon provides free of cost. There's a lot of research from Forrester, Gardner, and a variety of other organizations, including Raytheon, that can help you figure out, type of methodologies to kind of give you some kind of quick guides in the way to moving forward with any kind of insider threat program. So this one I always thought was an interesting quote. Don't expect what you don't inspect. And think about that. I've had many customers that have come to me and said, Mike, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was like, wow, that's an odd thing to say. They said, yeah. They said, once we began to inspect, once we began auditing, once we began monitoring, once we began to put in an effective insider threat program, we soon found out things. We soon began to understand our culture and how our employees are using our data. And it made them nervous. And it made them nervous. So you have to have the will to inspect. You have to have the culture. That requires a change in culture. Do not be scared. Do not fear changing the culture. You can do this responsibly. You can do this effectively. to not only protect your information, protect the privacy of individuals. So how do you do it? So what is the step? So what we've done in the past is Raytheon's come up with, we have like a 9-step program to talks about building an effective insider threat program. And you could use these 9 steps for not only an effective insider threat program, but you could use it for building any kind of cyber program, whether it's an insider threat program, whether it's a cyber situational program. I think these are common sense steps that you can put together for any type of program. So I'm just going to quickly kind of blow this up here. So it starts with a little bit about the policies, procedures, processes, technical controls, training awareness, and risk management. Those are really big fluff words. And a lot of people say, wow, Mike, you know, those are words that we have in place for a lot of our programs. And it's true. So we're not trying to tell you to change anything with respect to how you build programs, but you have to have specific programs and specific policies, processes, controls, training awarenesses for your insider threat program. You have to discuss in your program whether you're talking about prevention or detection. You know, prevention is a great way to kind of, you know, in your training and awareness to employees, you know, to talk about different insider threat use cases to make them more aware so they can help you identify a problem before it becomes a problem. So there's a lot of things you can do from an insider threat program that's similar to the way you're building other programs in cyber. One of the things that we believe is an effective way for insider threat, and one we believe in 100%, is the ability to audit and monitor. Have an effective program in place. And what we mean by that is that we want to have an effective program that audits and monitors the user activity. We call it user activity monitoring, content-aware detection. Basically, the ability to look and to identify and audit and monitor an individual's activity. And we'll get a little more into that as we move forward. So I have these nice animated slides that now you can see that I was the only one. So auditing a program. We believe that's the catalyst, you know, for identifying a solution. You need one. You need to have an audit program. You need to talk to the people that have done it before. Talk to those guys. Talk to the Carnegie Mellons. Talk to the Raytheons. Talk to the SMLRs. Talk to the Jack and Lewis. Talk to everybody who's done before. Look at the type of tools they're using. Maybe the type of tools they're using are correct for you. Maybe they're not. Maybe they have a tool that really wouldn't work in your environment. And then what do you do next? What now? You've got an effective program. You're auditing a program. What now? What's the next step? But it sometimes is not about the technology. So we talk a lot about technology. I'm a technologist. I talk a lot about technology. I talk a lot about tools. But for some people, it's just not a technology problem. They could solve a similar problem, similar auditing and monitoring problem, through other mechanisms, through having a solid foundation in place. Technology is a significant part of it, but technology, like Alan said, is not a silver bullet. You need to start with a solid foundation. You need to have the must-haves. You need to establish an effective insider threat program. You need to have the business case, the staffing, the stakeholders, education's key, governance, document your activities, and then you select the tool, and then you begin to implement. So as our friend Michael Tice said from Carnegie Mellon, hope is not a strategy when you're building an effective program. So how do you establish the program? We talked a little bit about it before, the building blocks of establishing an insider threat program. You have to have the top-down direction. When you're building an effective program, a program is not effective if the ground roots effort. You have to have the support of the C-level leadership to build an effective program. It has to be top-down driven. You have to establish a vision. You have to put someone in charge. I think one of the things that I've seen go wrong with a lot of insider threat programs and even cyber programs is you do not have a belly button. You do not have a point of contact. You don't have a person who could say, this is the direction based upon our vision and based upon leadership, we're going to move in these steps. If you don't have somebody in charge, there becomes a lot of finger pointing. A lot of people that are saying, well, I thought he was doing it. I thought they were doing it. You need to have someone in charge. You need to put someone in charge. Provide somebody as an insider threat program manager for your organization. That's one of the first key steps you should think about when building a program. And you could have different roles. When you detect and prevent, how do you respond? Who's handling incident response? Is HR handling incident response? Is security handling incident response? IT? For each problem, you should have a different way to respond to an incident. You should have a different incident response person. Maybe it's one hierarchy team that if it's an IT problem, you have an incident response through IT. That could be a cyber problem. If it's an HR problem, you'd have HR responding, and so forth down the line. But you have to have that clearly establish those roles and responsibilities. If you don't understand why you're implementing your auditing and monitoring, just stop. Just kind of stop right there. Kind of go back to the drawing board. What's your authority? What's your directive? What is their policy that allows you to establish an effective auditing and monitoring program? So why am I doing this? The justification. There's a tremendous amount of government executive orders. There's a tremendous amount of other commercial regulations coming down the pike. There's also different audit trail requirements for different markets and different industries that you need to look at and determine the why am I doing this. If you figure out the why, then you can figure out the other steps to effectively monitor and audit. Building a staff. So as we told before, you're not only building a staff for implementing a program, you're also building a staff to bring awareness to your employees. And that's key. You're not only training your operators or training your team, your program team, you also need to bring in training for other parts of your staff. You need to talk about different prevention techniques, potentially different responses to that. These individuals need to kind of be brought on. They could be a little different. The type of staff that for a cyber insider threat team, to me, combines technical IT understandings, but also maybe a counterintelligence, maybe a law enforcement, maybe behavioral scientist understanding. It's the blending of those skills. It's the people that have done it before and have seen it before. But the staff is a critical part of the process. So when we talked a little bit about stakeholders, who should be involved, who's going to be brought to the table? In my theory, you need to bring a lot of stakeholders to the table. And you need to engage with them early. We've seen in the past where, people have tried to put an effective program together, but they haven't told anybody. One of the funny stories I had with a client was they rolled out a technology, they rolled out an audit and monitoring technology, they rolled out a host-based technology. So they put an endpoint technology on everybody's computer. But what they failed to kind of realize, they didn't tell IT. They didn't tell IT what the program was about. So when there was any kind of problems, the first person that IT blamed was security. Because they said, well, look, security told us to roll out this security tool. We don't know what it did, but now our users are having significant problems. So, of course, the first one to be blamed is the security team because we have no visibility into the problem or into the technique or tools being developed or even rolled out. So what you really need to involve is you need to look at the team, and when I mean team, your stakeholders as a team. You need to bring in whether it's the union, whether it's CIO, the security group, the computer investigations, could be CND, the computer network defense team, the IT guy. It could be HR, could be legal. It could be other people that own data, the data owners. So you're not only just involving your traditional IT guys, but you're bringing all stakeholders together Bring them to the table and bring them to the table early. You see there, counsel is a key point. Legal is a key point. Bring legal in. Legal will be your, what I call your sanity check. They'll be the people to ensure that you're not encroaching on people's privacy, and they'll people ensure that you're keeping within your compliance statements of your company. If you think there's an easy button, you're wrong. We're not Staples, no cyber program, no insider threat program. We don't have the easy button. If we had the easy button, I think a lot of companies out there would be kind of out of business. You wouldn't see all these cyber companies. You wouldn't see all these different companies popping up with behavioral analytics, statistical analytic companies. You wouldn't bring up any other companies that are interested in, for example, talking about their next active malware programs. We know this is not an easy problem. And we know there's not an easy button out there. Because guess what? Insider threat and cyber really is a combination of the art and the science. It's just one thing to understand building algorithms. If you go back to the engineering, my engineering background is that if somebody tells you of a problem, that you can develop code, you can develop an algorithm against that problem. You can do it pretty quickly because you can write your requirements document, you can determine how to test that algorithm based upon, the results, the inputs, the outputs, you can come up with your nice algorithm. But the problem is, who's coming up with that behavior? Who's coming up with the requirements? Who's coming up with the part that requires you to build that algorithm, to build that statistical analysis? So you really need to combine what I call the art, and the art could come from stakeholders, it could come from thought leaders, it could come from people that have understood the problem and seen use cases. These are people that are really trying to understand what the problem is, what the behavior of an insider is, what the behavior of an actor on the outside that has become an insider. And once you understand the behavior, you can develop the math around it. You can develop your algorithms. But that's a very tough problem. Is it insurmountable? No, it's not insurmountable. I believe there's a lot of people out there that are really kind of nailing this right down today. I think a lot of people are kind of solving this problem between art and science and math. Combining the behavioral scientists with the engineers and the programmers. But keep that in mind. Insider threat has not been around that long, or at least insider threat companies focused on solving the problem have not been around long. The insider threat problem has been around for centuries. But now people are actually taking an interest in how to solve the problem. So finding an insider threat. So there's a lot of, and I'm going to kind of blow this up here, because I think it's a lot of different things that on this slide and a lot of moving parts, which is always interesting. So if you look at the way Carnegie Mellon, this is kind of a diagram I kind of stole from them, understanding how technology enables and what we mean by technical observables. If you look at, there's a lot of precursors, what I call predispositions, unmet expectations, the act, and all that good stuff. There's a lot of things that draw into a technical observable. So, for example, you might have had an incident. Say you hired an employee, and by the way, I believe all employees from day one do not come in with the mindset to take information, commit IT sabotage, commit fraud against your company. I believe when you do your vetting process up front, I believe all employees are good employees when they start. Now, something happens sometimes to some employees, not all employees, but some employees, whether it's a change in financial stature, change in potentially different life events, getting divorced, could be that bankruptcy, pretty much could be their performance review, a bad performance review. It could be an external attribute that somehow changes the mindset of an individual. And that could be a precursor. That could be unmet expectation. That could be a predisposition that causes them to do an act. And the act is a technical observable, just like all these are technical observables. But the act causes the theft and the damage. The act causes the problem, the issue, causes it from being maybe a malicious to a non-malicious to a malicious act. But there's a lot of different technical observables that if you effectively audit and monitor, you could potentially identify those technical observables before the act, before the theft and the damage. It could be insider threat education and awareness for your employees. But you have to understand all the different kind of the technical observables that could feed into this engine. And if you understand the technical observables, you understand different aspects of what could affect people's behavior, you'll be better off to understand the act and then potentially the damage and risk based upon those acts. Everybody understands the Washington Post test. Everybody understands what the Washington Post, I don't want to be on the Washington Post. I don't want to be on the Washington Post for the properly monitoring, auditing people that kind of against different policy, or excuse me, privacy issues. So that's where legal can help you. Legal can make sure you have the proper governance and oversight. So engage your legal counsel. Ensure that you have the proper authority and the policies in place. Identify basic abuses in your operation. Whatever products or other technologies, wherever you have in place, make sure you have the proper controls in place. Whether it's a policy control board to understand what you're going to audit, what you're going to monitor. Make sure that you can pass the Washington Post test, the sniff test. And that's a very effective part for governance and oversight. I think with all programs, you need to answer the basic questions, the who, what, when, where, how, why. Ask them. Ask before you put them. Don't assume anything. Assumptions are bad. Who owns the data? Who has access to the data? Who deploys tools? Where do they deploy them? When? How? So all these type of questions are great questions to ask up front. Because once you ask the questions, then you can document it. Then you can build a trail of why, your reasons, your compliance statement. So if you do get audited, your program gets audited, and people come down and ask you, why do you have this program in place? You can go, this is why we have it in place. We've asked all the questions. We went to all the data holders. We went to the stakeholders. We understand the problem. We have clear guidance. The who, what, when, how, why. Document is key. And then finally, as you can see, we can even get down to tools. So during all this conversation, I think we went through 7 or 8 building blocks. We never talked about technology. We never talked about buying anything. We talked about a lot of things that you could do up front before you even look at type of a tool. So we built the building blocks. We built the foundation. And when you're ready, you built your foundation, you built your building blocks, now you can select a tool. Now you can select a tool that fits your organization. And be a little creative, because there's a lot of tools out there and there's a lot of people that are rebranding themselves as insider threat, rebranding themselves as cyber situational awareness. Everybody seems to chase the market. Everybody seems to chase the dollars. I mean, everybody seems to say, hey, insider threat is becoming a big buzzword. Let's brand ourselves insider threat. Hey, cyber situational awareness has become a big buzzword. Let's brand ourselves cyber situational awareness, ATP. All these are buzzwords. So when you're looking at tools, looking at people that have done it, look at people that have operational knowledge. Look at people that can help you. Look at people that understand how to build an effective program. Look at technologies that provide answers, not more questions. Your technology today should not be deployed, and after it's deployed, all it gives you is information that leads you to more questions. That's not effective. That takes more resources, takes more money, takes more funding. And start small. You can increase your capabilities as your program matures. You don't have to go for like everything up front. You don't have to buy every technology up front. You don't have to buy every tool up front. look at it and go, you know what, I'm going to start small. I'm going to build my system from the ground up. I'm going to get all my techniques, all my process in place. I'm going to put together a proof of concept. I'm going to put together a pilot. I'm going to build my building blocks. I'm going to build. I'm going to move forward. So ensure that your program can sustain. It's good to increase your capabilities as you mature, as it gets ready for enterprise-ready capabilities. And one thing your tool should have is context. Any technology should have context. Context of the event, context of a person's intent. Because when you're talking about insider threat, this is where it's different a little bit from your traditional cyber problem. Insider threat is about an individual. It's about a person. It's about a person that you trust that has either did something malicious or non-malicious. Maybe they've made a mistake. Having the context of the information around that act and event will help you save good employees and quickly remediate and reduce the risk of the really malicious employee. So you need the context, because we need user attribution. And one of the best ways to use user attribution is to put some effective monitoring on the endpoint. So keep that in mind as you go through your tool selection tips. So of course, with any program, you're going to have your naysayers. You're going to have your people that could go, you know what I mean? I don't think this is effective. I don't think this is a program that we want to put in place. It could be your IT guys, because they could feel that you're threatening them, that, they've spent a lot of money in building their external defenses. So the idea is you have to work with the stakeholders. You have to be able to effectively tell them to say, hey, you can use any kind of our technology today, our tool, for your effort as well. We talked about an external actor who has made its way into your organization and is now stealing the credentials of an employee. That external actor, when they steal those credentials, to me, when they're on the inside, is an insider threat. They're now an insider threat. So the same program you're building to look at user attribution, you can look at potentially a piece of malware, a piece of APT that's working on the inside, because that now is an insider threat who's compromised credentials of one of your trusted employees. So you think about it from an IT point of view, an IT defense, a network defense, it would be an effective tool to be able to understand what an actual user is doing and what a piece of code is doing. And I would believe your IT people would be very welcoming to that type of concept. We asked a little bit about putting a process in place for building a program. So when you implement it, an implementation plan, you kind of want to look at a couple things. You want to make sure you can do a lab installation. Any vendor out there should provide you, the ability to do an implementation plan. You see here, I say demand it. I would. I think when you're looking at different technologies or whatever, if you're using a vendor or even an internal resource, you should demand an implementation. You should be able to spell out how you're going to effectively roll out the program, how you're going to go from selection of a tool to implementation of the tool in the lab to a proof of concept to a pilot, and what are my time frames? What are my checks and balances? When do I involve the stakeholder? What am I doing with incident response? How am I putting together an effective incident response team? That could all be in your implementation plan. So demand it. Ask for it. Ask for the implementation plan. Ask for help. One of the ways you can even include in your implementation plan is a communication plan. We talked a little bit about one of the challenges is changing the culture of individuals, changing the culture of your company. We've had many challenges working with clients out there that when you go into a program, and a lot of it comes into it, they go, we do not monitor people's activities. That's against our culture. And to them, I say, well, that's good. And that culture might have been effective, 10 years ago. And we're not talking about Big Brother here. And I explained to him, I was like, look, if I'm an employee that works for a company, and I work for Raytheon. I am proud that Raytheon has an effective auditing and monitoring program established, as well as an effective cyber program for overall situational awareness. Because I'm glad that Raytheon is protecting my information. Raytheon is protecting my personal information, my HR information, my security information. They're protecting my client's information, my customers' information. I do not want anybody to, for example, take information out of the company that could harm us or harm me personally in any other way. So I'm proud that Raytheon has an effective. I don't consider it an attack on my privacy. I believe everybody should have an effective program in place. Ask your vendor a little bit about help desk tools, training. We talked a little bit about training from a situational awareness. Or ask them because if they might have an effective training that you could use internally at your company. In a placebo effect. I think this is kind of funny, the placebo effect, because get ready for blame. Remember what I talked to you a little bit about earlier on about the IT guys that, anytime that went wrong with the machine, they always blame the security guys for putting security tools on their computers that they don't know about. The problem is get ready for the blame. Whether it's blame from leadership, whether it's blame from other stakeholders, get ready. And it's okay. If you're prepared, if you've taken these steps, if you understand the problem, understand the risk, you'll be ready for the blame. You'll be ready to effectively tell them why we should have a program, why it's important to maintain a program. And finally, this is not a set it and forget it activity. Your program needs to be fluid. You need to continually improve your audit policies. You need to, for example, if there requires a change in your process, a change in your training, do not get set in your ways. Do not stay with the status quo. Just because you've established an effective program, you must continue to reevaluate the program, reevaluate your techniques, reevaluate your processes, reevaluate your procedures or training, reevaluate who your stakeholders are and what contribution you're making. Look across the board at your total program. Do it on a 6-month, maybe a quarterly, maybe 6 months, however frequent your organization believes. I believe you should do it at least twice a year, a biannual review of the program to make sure it's still effective. Because you don't want to have a non-effective program. It's kind of like having a non-effective technology. I don't like customers that, Raytheon's a technology company. And the last thing I want Raytheon customers to do is buy our technology and don't use it. It does us no good. First of all, we're not helping you. We're not solving a problem. Second of all, if I ask the customer for a reference customer and the customer is never using the technology or tool, then what's the purpose? You're wasting resources, you're wasting money. So make sure do not set it and forget it. Make sure you're looking at your technologies and your tools, your processes through the whole chain. So if you kind of take these steps, if you look at this business kind of staff it, you'll be prepared. You'll be better prepared than most. A lot of people out there are just coming late to the party. A lot of people really still are hesitant. A lot of people don't believe that they have a problem, so they've kind of got their head in the sand. But if you're doing this now, if you're building your foundation now, you'll be better prepared than most. And this includes not only an insider threat program, but a cyber program. It's building the building blocks for an effective cyber program. It's combining technologies. It's building an in-depth, a defense in-depth program. You can take the same type of techniques, the same type of skills, the same type of plan, and apply it to any program, including an insider threat program, a cyber program, or any program. My name is Michael Crouse, and I'm the Director for Insider Threat Strategies for Raytheon Cyber Company.